Sometimes you need just a quick, good little purchase to give you a boot in the butt. Hey, it's Care. Welcome to Matic at the Lake. I showed you all the stuff that I have gathered and collected over the last 3 years or so for my dad's patriotic junk journal altered book bundle project. I've been putting it off and putting it off and putting it off and putting it off because sometimes I have a very clear idea in my head of what I want it to look like, and I know I can do it, so I go great guns. Sometimes I have a real clear idea in my head of how I want things to look and how the project to be, and no clue how to do it, so I put it off. That's the case with my uncle's military war nautical project. I have vast amounts of really cool stuff for it. I know how I want it to look, but I'm not sure I can make it happen. And then there's a third option that I have all the stuff and I have no idea how I want it to look or how I'm going to make it all work. So there's 3 different options for me. I know what I want and I know I can do it, so I do it. I know what I want and I'm not sure I can do it, so I put it off. I have no idea what I want, so I don't even know if I can do it, so I put it off. Dad's was in the 3rd category in that I had all the stuff. I kind of knew what I wanted, but not really. I didn't know how I was going to put all that stuff. It's a half-hour, sort of a haul video, kinda. I'll put a link below in case you missed it. I was looking for something else, don't you know? I was on Etsy, and one of my favorite stores on Etsy is My Porch Prints. She does extraordinary work. I think there's a lot of really, really, really good designers. Vintage by Me is one of my favorites. She does fantastic work too. But My Porch Prints is sort of in a class all by herself. And this kit came up, this digital kit. And of course, I didn't write down the name of it. Maybe she has it on some of the... No. I'll put it somewhere so you know which kit this is. It's so pretty. I didn't print the whole thing just yet. For some reason, I printed part of it twice and the rest of it not at all. Doesn't matter. I will eventually print it all out. But look, Congress Declaration, United States, General Congress, and then some vintage signs and flags and the presidential seal, postcard, USA. I mean, it's just got We the People. It's just got a little bit of everything. These great little banners. So you can use this as just fold it in half and there you have a page. She also almost always does background pages. So what I should have done is print this 2-sided so that the stars would be on one side and the other stuff on the other. Look at these stars. It's all grungy, watercolory, pre-coffee stained, grunged up on the edges. I don't know if this is something new that my printer is doing, but on my borderless, I don't even know if it's going to come up on... There's a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of border. While it's colored, it's not colored right. Here you can see it on the stars maybe better. So the stars are there. It's printing there, but it still leaves... And now that's going to bother me. Like I said, I don't know if that's new or if I'm just now noticing it. And who cares? But anyway, I should have, and I probably will reprint this yet again and do it two-sided so that when I fold it, I have these great pages. Whether I fold it this way or this way, these are going to be my junk journal pages. I think. I'm not sure, but that's the idea right now. And so the flags, the Americana red, you know, it's not the super, super bright red, white, and blue red. It's more of the Americana off-white, dingy kind of colors, more muted. I love those colors. So there's that page, red, white, and blue pages. So that's a flag. More stars and more stars. That's just so cool. It's so cool. All grungy. Oh, she speaks my language, that girl. At least on papers. Envelopes. So layered pockets will look like this when assembled. So they're layered, so you have all different beautiful things looking at you. Awesome. Beautiful. She gives you instructions on how to put it all together. Some corner pockets. Some envelopes. Banner. Bookmarky kind of things. A large envelope. And like I said, this is 2 parts of a 5-part kit. So there's loads more to this kit than I have printed out. Oh, look! Tabs. I think there's some tickets too, if memory serves. Another envelope. All matchy-matchy coordinating, which, you know, oh, that just speaks to me. My printer jacked this one all up. Nice work. I'm not going to scrap it, though. I'm going to use the bits and pieces for collage or backgrounds or clusters, or there's all kinds of ways to still use this, even though it's jacked. I don't know what's up with my printer. So I went ahead and purchased this kit and another one that I didn't print any of. I'll have to show you that on another Dad's project video, but it was similar, and it was a huge kit. I think there's 14 pages of tickets and tags and labels and all kinds of stuff that coordinates, not matches, but coordinates well with it. Huge kit, and I think it was $1.96 or something like that. Like, you can't beat it, even with the cost of the ink and the paper. It's less than $3 for this huge kit that booted me in the arse to get this project started. Because now I have an idea. Now I got a plan, and I'm gonna clue you in on my plan here in just a second. But that was just the push that I needed finally to get this project going. And remember, because I bought this digital kit, I could print, you know, if I wanted to do an entire journal just with the stars, I could print them double-sided 100 times, because it's mine now to do with what I want, to print it as many times as I want. I'm not selling these. I'm not, and you can use them for commercial purposes. There is a specific number. Sometimes it's 500, sometimes it's 100, depending on who created it and what their policy is. But once you buy it, for this project, I could print it 27 times. I only bought it once. I think that's one of the coolest things about digikits. They're yours forever to do, you know, and this is timeless. This stuff will go absolutely in my uncle's military journal, because his is going to be vintage. His is going to be military. His is going to be about United States and World War II. So all of these pages will fit beautifully into that. So maybe this is the boot in the arse for 2 projects, uncles and dads. We'll see. I will show you the rest of this kit because, as I said in the other video, I have so much stuff. I have stuff enough for 3 projects, a glue book, an altered book, and a junk journal. And in this kit, there are pages that have 2-page spreads. And so they're designed to print borderless and fold it in half. And you've got grunge down the center line, grunge around all the sides, and then the pages. They're beautiful. And so this part of the kit might go in the altered book, and that part of the kit might be the junk journal. Just make a 9x6 cover and you're good to go. Here's what I'm thinking, because I like things that are matchy-matchy. To me, these things don't work together at all. Americana, off-white, vintagey, bright, modern, cleaner, if you will, versus grungy. So these things aren't going to work together in my projects anyway. Some people can pull it off. I don't want to be one of them. So now what I'm going to do is just separate my goodies into vintage and bright. So the junk journal might be vintage, the altered book might be bright. I don't know yet. We'll have to see how much of whatever I have. And I thought I'd bring you along with me because some people are new to this. You know, we always sort of assume that everyone is kind of where we are. At least we did before social media. I think, left turn, I think that's why everyone hates everybody so much now, is because now we know what people are thinking. Before, we just thought that they thought like we thought. Even people close to us, our friends and family, we think like they think like we think. We just always assume. You know, that's why when we're driving down the highway, our speed's the right speed. The person in front of us is too effing slow, and we go around them. And then we're going the right speed again. But then some crazy mofo comes around, passes us like we're tied to a post. He crazy. He's a crazy driver, that one. Our speed's the right speed. Do you know what I mean? Like, so we always thought, now we know. Because social media is out there, everyone puts out what they think. It does not agree, even your friends and family. Not even close to what you think. And so I think that's why we're getting polarized. Because now we know what people are really thinking. We're not just assuming. Anyway, left turn, but I'm back. The reason I bring this up is because I kind of assume that people are where I am or ahead of me. And again, this channel is primarily for newbies and even people who are established at this don't have a similar idea about. I see people making junk journals all the time who have zero concept of good elements of design. That's why that series is started. Coordination and cohesiveness and size and contrast. Not too much, not too little. I've seen people make 9x6 journals and have a 6-inch border of ribbon on it and wonder why it just doesn't feel right. Why isn't it selling? Because it doesn't feel right. Because it's out of balance. Things have to make sense design-wise for us to feel. We're naturally inclined to it. Doesn't mean we all understand it or how to use it or how to work with it. So I thought I would show you how I am separating these things. And maybe it's just too obvious that I just wanted a reason to bring you along with me. And if it's too obvious for you, well then our work here is done. Join me in the next video. That one may not be so obvious. But, so bright. If it's white, and even some of the whites they're not bright white. But this is a great comparison. The grungy blue, the Barney barn-ish red, the off-white, even the lighter spots are just pretty tan. You know, it's off-white versus white. So I'm just going to compare everything to this. Is it bright or is it vintage? This, to me, is bright. I think all of my ribbons are pretty bright. So, but here's the cool thing. If I wanted to use these, because I really like these, and if I use this in the altered book and this in the junk journal, it would kind of tie them all together. I can coffee dye this. Easy peasy. And then this would be vintage. So I'm going to put one over there because I know I can color it. And one I'm going to keep with the brights because. Now these are pretty bright compared to that dingy blue. If I wanted to, I'm pretty sure I could coffee dye them or dirty them up. But I only have the two, so I may as well keep them in the bright. Obviously bright. This is kind of dull. It's brighter than the pages, but it's dark enough that it might not matter. And I can see that I'm going to have more bright than vintage. I may be able to coffee dye this too. Oh look, the old pins are still in it. These are so old. So I'm going to put that with the vintage. Bright. Very bright. I mean, it doesn't get any brighter than that. I could coffee dye it. I could absolutely coffee dye it and vintage it up. In fact, I think I will. Because again, I think I'm going to have way more. Now this gray paper could go either way. And if I remember correctly, I had one or two of these. So that one's going to go there. I could coffee dye these. These are pretty vintagey. It's that off-white paper comparatively. So those will go in the vintage. Vintage, bright for sure. Could coffee dye it, although it's probably 100% polyester, which may not take the staining well. Polyester's plastic, sort of. This is pretty vintage. I think I could coffee it up. It's not quite as bright red as the others, and so I think I could dull it down and use that in the vintage books. These are all very bright. That'll go in there. Off-white, off-white. Just because Rosie's pretty bright, even though it's got this nice vintage background. The whole thing is pretty bright. Norman Rockwell is pretty vintage, but that is white. So I'm going to... And putting some vintage feeling stuff in with the brights will help tie the 2 or 3 pieces together. Bright for sure. Bright. These would coffee dye really well. And it's on that telephone book paper, so it's not bright. So I'll put that with the vintage. Certainly bright white. The cards are pretty bright. Modern Magazine's pretty bright. Or telephone book. Telephone book stuff. Vintagey, but I'm going to put it in the brights anyway in order to tie the whole thing together. A nice vintage looking barn in the bright book will help tie all these things together. I feel like I can really get away with putting a few pieces of vintage-y stuff in the brights, but if I put the brights with the vintage, this is not a great example because it's not bad. I think it's too much. It's too stark of a difference putting a bright with the vintage stuff, but I feel like I can get away with something a little vintagey, but still pretty bright in with the brights. These with the stars and stripes seem pretty vintagey to me. I'm going to see if I can coffee dye them or vintage photo them with Tim Holtz Distress Oxides. I might see what I can do to vintage those up. And I have quite a few of them, so that'd be cool if it worked. This is pretty vintage. It's pretty yellowed and aged. So that'll go in the vintage. Modern, bright. These are very bright pictures. So that'll go with the bright. Victorian, all of this Victorian stuff, of course it goes in the vintage. Yep. Model Railroad. This could vintage up easily, beautifully. It's sort of vintage already. It's not terribly bright, but I can dull it down. Certainly the old music, for sure. That's pretty bright. This is pretty vintagey. The cream color, the deeper red, and the darker blue. I have two of these newspapers, I think. The eagle's pretty bright, and this is kind of muted down with the silhouettes of the soldiers, so I'll split it up that way. Very bright. Could go either way. I'm going to put it in with the bright since it's yellow. The bright white map. This is pretty bright. Now, this is grungy and vintagey. It's the deep barn red versus the bright stars and stripes red. However, again, using that as my guide between the two, if this were just in a box, I'd say vintage. But putting them together, this screams bright now because it's not as vintage. Again, could coffee dye it? Absolutely. In fact, I may. I love the wood grain on it. But it would have to be toned down quite a bit to get rid of that stark difference in order to fit well into this vintage project. So I am going to coffee dye it. I love this stamp. This whole thing looks old. I will coffee dye that. Certainly an old newspaper from the 50s, vintage. I can coffee dye that. Bright. Dingy, vintagey. So I think since I only have one or two tiny little pieces of this, I'm going to put it in with in the bright book to tie the whole bundle together. That's kind of cool how it landed. Serendipity. You gotta love that. This is a really good lesson in you don't always have to have everything the way that it's supposed to be, because if you did it the way it's supposed to be, it looks kind of weird. But having it off center like that is pretty awesome. So I'm going to keep those together and maybe do it that way. I don't want these weird people in my dad's journal. That's pretty cool. I could just, I don't know, I might use it together, I might not. What does this look like? We did sky and off. That might be kind of fun. Get the whole vista. Or put the boys more in the center. That's a kind of a neat look. Vintage eagle, absolutely. More vintage paper. Bright. Kind of vintagey. Little yellowed pages that can go in there. Bright white cards. I don't have enough vintage oxide to vintage photo to do all of this. So that'll go in the brights. Bright. Although I don't think I don't have a vintage notepad. So I might try coffee dyeing. This is almost pink. These stripes are pink. I love having my coffee handy dandy and just trying this stuff. See how it works. Will it make it pinker? Will it vintage it up enough? Question mark. I don't know. Super bright. Super bright, super bright, 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 bright. These are pretty modern, so these will go with the bright, but the K & Company stamps, very vintagey. So I'll use most of them in the vintage and a few here and there in the bright. I hope this is making sense to someone else other than me. Old stamp. I'm going to coffee dye that. The Disney stuff, if I can find some vintage Disney, I will put that in the vintage book. All the rest of the Disney stuff will go in the bright pile. I have these black and gold and clear, so they'll go, I have 3, so I'll put one in the glue book, one in the altered book, and one in the junk journal, just because. Shades of green, it's kind of an off-white. That could go in the vintage. That could be my notepad, so I didn't have to trash that other one. I didn't really trash it. It's just fodder for something else. If I do that in the bright, well, then we're all set. And this can be collage stuff for another day. Gold could go either way. I don't really like it for the vintage, so I'll keep it with the bright. Certainly bright. Certainly bright. Certainly vintage. Vintage. Oh, I think I'll keep these bright. 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 Ooh, that'll go in the vintage. Cool. Bright and bright. So, now we have quite a bit more bright than we do vintage, but I haven't printed out all of my kit. There's 14, there's at least 20 more pages to this kit, which are pages, they're ephemera, they're embellishments, they're all kinds of different things for this project. So there's quite a bit here on the vintage side as well to work with. So I'd say it's about even. So the altered book will be one way and the junk journal will be the other. I don't know just yet how I'm going to work that out. I will keep you posted on how that all progresses so that you can kind of follow along with how this particular set of projects, and I say set, again, I usually do 3 pieces, sometimes 4, sometimes there's mini journals involved. Now that I'm doing the zines, there might be some zines tucked in, not sure. So stay tuned. I will give you updates. Until then, you have a lovely crafty day. Love up your beastlies. Enjoy the summer while it's here, or whatever season it's in that you're watching this. We'll talk again soon. Matek at the lake. Out for now.